right. Shalom, shalom. Shalom, shalom. Welcome everybody to our Torah study on tonight. We are given another day to work this thing out with fear and with trembling. And we all got to do our work. Everybody's got to do their work in their respective places where they've been planted. And Most High Yah is leading them, and they're being led by the Ruach. It does say in the book of Romans that those who are led by the Ruach, those are the sons of Elohim. And so if you're being led by the Ruach and he is waking you up in your respective city, wherever you are in this bi-state region, also throughout the land, what we call the United States of America, and not only over here, but abroad, everywhere that his people have been scattered. And I know some people are somewhat, when you start to talk about Israelites and being scattered to the four corners, and they seem to think that it's not necessary to say that, but apparently they haven't read the book of James, because in the book of James, his whole book was directed to the diaspora. He said to the 12 tribes that are scattered abroad. And so he was writing specifically to the diaspora, or the 12 tribes. And so we understand and we know that Israel, true Israel, is not over in Palestine right now. Over in Palestine, you have the sons of Japheth. You have, some of them are called Ashkenazi Jews. You also have the Sephardic. You also have the Hasidic Jews, the Khazar Jews. And so you have a number of descendants of the sons of Japheth that is over there in Palestine right now. And there's a lot of things going on in Palestine, as we all know. And I thought it was noteworthy to, yes.
Real quick, are those Gentiles?
In Palestine?
The sons of Jacob?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. You'll see that in Genesis chapter 10, I think it's verse number 4. They talk about these are the isles of the Gentiles, the sons of Japheth. So the sons of Japheth are the Gentiles, and they've kind of flipped the script on us, because they made us believe we were Gentiles, and they are Israel, the sons of Jacob, and they flipped it on us when actually they are Japheth, Gentiles, and we are the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And it does make a difference. Some people say, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're from the 12 tribes or if you're a Gentile. It doesn't matter. But that's not according to Torah. Yeah, 10th chapter of Genesis. In Genesis chapter 10, the question was asked if Japheth and the Japhethites, are they Gentiles? You go to Genesis chapter 10 and you look at verse number 5. Genesis chapter 10, verse 5, and it says, by these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands, everyone after his tongue, after their families, in their nations. And that's talking about Japheth. So Japheth and all the sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshach, Tyrus, the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Riphath, Togarmah, and the sons of Javan, Elisha, and Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. So these were the sons of Japheth, and it was prophesied that Japheth would dwell in the tents of Shem.
Verse 5, it says in verse 5 too.
Yeah, and verse 5, by these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands. So when you look at the sons of Japheth, they're called Gentiles. If you look at the sons of Ham and the sons of Shem, they're not called Gentiles in Genesis, the 10th chapter. but the sons of Japheth were called Gentiles. So it is worth noting and understanding who is who, especially in this day and time that we're living, as we see everything unfold around the world. We are on the brink of World War III. I believe it already started. I believe it started when Russia went into Ukraine. That's when I believe it started. And so we've seen it progress. I remember when Russia went into Ukraine and some of the generals, United States generals, because I was watching on the news media, and they said, oh, this war will be over in 6 months. You know, Russia's going to go in there, Ukraine and their army, which Ukraine had the largest army when it comes soldier to soldier than any other European nation. But that army is decimated. That army's gone. They are drafting women, and they're calling Ukrainians that have left Ukraine and went to these other nations. They're calling them back in. They want them to come on back in. Shalom, shalom. Shalom, come on in. They're actually calling those Ukrainians back into the country because their army is decimated. Their army is decimated. So it's important to know who is who as this unfolds. It's important to know who is who, because if you believe that the people over there are the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the ones who are in Palestine, if you believe that they are the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the chosen people, then your whole understanding of prophecy is going to be skewed. It's going to be off. You're going to miss the mark if you think that they are, because actually, if you believe that they are, then you believe in 1948 was the restoration of Israel, and when that happened, then our Messiah should have came. Our Messiah should have been here. He should have been here by now, and we should be in the 1,000-year reign, the millennium reign of peace. We should already be in that if they were the true Israelites. They're not. They're not the true Israelites. They're Gentiles. They're sons of Japheth. And in this lesson today, we're going to come back. Actually, I wanted to come back to Genesis chapter 10 and pull out some of these. So I'm kind of glad that we did read that, because it's important to know the sons of Japheth, because it does come back up in prophecy. And we're starting to see that play out now over in the Middle East, what they call the Middle East. I'm not convinced that that little strip of land where they say that land is Israel, and I'm not convinced that's where it's at. Mainly because when Abraham left Egypt in the 13th chapter of Genesis, when Abraham left Egypt, you know where he went? Anybody know where he went? He went south. He went south. So if you look where Egypt is and you go south, that's where Abraham went. He went south. And so he told them from the great river in Egypt, which is the Nile, and the Nile doesn't start in Egypt. If you trace the Nile and go down to the Nile starts down there in Ethiopia, Tanzania, Kenya, around in that area is where the Nile starts, and then it spills into the Mediterranean. So you go from the Nile to the Euphrates, that's a huge swath of land. I mean, that's massive. And so that little strip that they have up there now, I don't believe that's Israel at all. But we have to be careful, because in the 12th chapter of Revelation, in verse number 9, anybody knows what that says? Revelations chapter 12 and verse number 9. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So the devil, Satan, his job is to deceive the whole world. He's very deceptive. Paul said he is the prince and the power of the air. So what goes through the air right now? Well, we've got, even this lesson here is going out over the air, going to different platforms. You got YouTube, you got Facebook. The prince and power of the air, a lot of our technology right now is going through the air. Your television, every time you turn on the television and your news media, all of that is coming through the airways. The prince and power of the air is Satan, and he is trying to deceive the whole world. In fact, he's done a very good job of deceiving the whole world. And nobody is untouchable. Because a lot of times you think people who are in the Roman Catholic Christian construct of Christianity, the churchiality, people think that they're untouchable when it comes to deception. But many of them are deceived, and that's a different class than what I wanted to say today. But many of them are deceived, especially when it comes down to who is who, and then the plan of salvation and what salvation means and everything. Many of them are deceived because they've taken the Roman Catholic construct of Christianity, theology, took those courses, and that's how they have their understanding. But on tonight, it's important for us to know who's who over there in the land and where Israel is. Right now, Israel is scattered to the four corners. And in Luke chapter 21 and verse number 24, Luke 21:24, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword and shall be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. So Judah, which is a southern kingdom, is what he was speaking about here. Now, why was he specifically speaking about the southern kingdom, Judah? Because this is what, when he says they shall fall by the edge of the sword and be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles till the time the Gentiles be fulfilled. How do we know it was just the southern nation that he was talking to at this time? Anybody know why he was specifically talking to the southern nation? Because the 10 tribes had been dispersed. They had already gone out of Jerusalem and in what they called Judea at that time. The 10 tribes or the northern kingdom had already been scattered. And we see that in Yahuchanan, the 11th chapter, 49th verse, 50, 51, 52, because it talks about how Yahusha was supposed to die for that nation. And not only that nation, but them who were what? Scattered abroad. So the northern kingdom. So he had to die for the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom. And so it says here in Luke 21:24 that the southern kingdom is going to be led captive into all nations. And that's where they are now. They're in captivity into all nations, and Jerusalem is under the foot, or it's being trodden down by the Gentiles. Until their day is up, they're going to be the Gentiles is going to control Jerusalem and his people until their time is up. And when their time is up, that's what we call the end of the world. Whenever you read about, the end of the world, this is the end of the world. And when I was growing up and I was thinking the end of the world, I was thinking everything stops. That's it. It's all over. You know, like you watch a movie and you see the end, and nothing comes after that. That's what I was thinking. The end of the world, that means that's it. There's nothing else. But that's not how Torah teaches the end of the world. When the Torah talks about the end of the world, and when Yahusha talked about the end of the world in the 24th chapter of Matthew, when he talked about the end of the world, he was talking about the end of the Gentile reign. It's the end of an era. It's the end of the Gentile reign. So when the Gentile reign is over and when their reign comes to an end, that's the end of the world. Now we do have scripture to prove that, and it's not just me saying it, and it comes from the Apocrypha. And in the Apocrypha, if you go to 2 Ezra chapter 6, and I'm going to start at verse number 7. 2 Ezra chapter 6 and verse number 7. And this is reading out the Apocrypha, and I know a lot of people don't have the Apocrypha because the Apocrypha, now if you had the original King James, you would have 81 books. But the revised King James, which is about the fourth revision, they broke it down to 66 books. But there was originally 80 books, and in that 80 books, it was called the Apocrypha, and this is part of the Apocrypha. And it's 2 Ezra chapter 6. I'm sorry, can't answer that right now. This is 2 Ezra chapter 6 and verse number 7. Then answered I and said, what shall be the parting asunder of the times? What shall be the dividing of times? When we talk about the end of times, end of an era, end of the world, what is the parting asunder of the time? What is going to determine when one thing ends and the beginning of something else. He says it, or when shall be the end of the first and the beginning of it that followeth? And he said unto me, from Abraham unto Yishak, when Jacob and Esau were born of him, Jacob's hand held first the heel of Esau. For Esau is the end of the world. Now, Yahusha knew this when he wrote, and he was speaking, and they wrote what he said in Matthew 24. He knew what it said in the Apocrypha because the Apocrypha predated him. So he knew it. So when he talked about the end of the world, he was talking about the end of Esau's reign. When we come to the end of the Esau reign, that's why it says in Luke 21:24, the fullness of the Gentiles come in. When the fullness of the Gentiles, or their end of their era, that's the end of the world as we know it. So the terminology of the end of the world, it has to be defined through Scripture. In fact, everything has to be proven through Scripture. If you're going to have a doctrine, you're going to have a teaching, you're going to have a belief or anything, it has to be found in Scripture. You have to build doctrine off of the Scriptures. So, or when shall be the end of the first and the beginning of it that followeth? And he said unto me, from Abraham unto Yishak, when Jacob and Esau were born of him, Jacob's hand held first the heel of Esau. Verse number 9, for Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. So when we speak of the end of the world, we're speaking of the end of Esau's reign. We're speaking of the fullness of the Gentiles. We're speaking of the end time there. So when we talk about, oh, this is the end of the world. So when it's somebody, and you know who thinks it's the end of the world right now? I mean, you can go around the world. I mean, there's people over in Ukraine, and they see the decimation, the bombs, and everything blowing up, and all the killing, the bloodshed. They think that's the end of the world. Over in Palestine right now, and I think it's noteworthy that Hamas went into Israel on the 8th day of the Feast of Tabernacles. It was the 8th day, and that's when they went in there. And so when we look at how they might think the end of the world is, when you see the collapse of everything, if you can just kind of picture it, a lot of things that's going on around the world is so foreign to us, we can't really relate to it because we haven't had a war on our soil. We don't know what it's like to have bombs flying over. We don't like, even sitting in here and hearing and feeling the ground rumble and hearing things. And it's blood. We don't know what that's like. We don't know what it's like to have hospitals blown up and all the blood and people dying. We don't know what it's like to, if you stepped out of your house, if your house was still standing, and you seen bodies just laying out in the streets and body parts because they were blown up. That's totally foreign to us. So to them, they're thinking, man, this is the end of the world. Everything's coming to an end. This has to be Armageddon. This has to be the end. But the end of the world, defined in Scripture and Torah, is when Esau's reign is over. The Gentiles are full, the fullness of their time. And then what comes next is Jacob. So the beginning of the new world is when Jacob, or the descendants of Jacob, the 12 tribes, and our Messiah, when he takes his reign, and you have the millennial reign, and then for eternity, actually, you're going to have the reign of Jacob. That's the new world. That's what's coming, and that's what we're waiting for, and we're very close to that right now. But I want to go through some things on tonight that will hopefully help us, because there's some scriptures that we've used in the past to think, and we use those scriptures to say that this is talking about the rapture. You know, and I'm not, I can only speak for myself, and everybody has their own testimony, but I don't believe in the rapture like it's been defined to us through Christianity. I don't believe that, because they believe in a pre-trib rapture and everything, even though you can go to Scripture and it shows that the first ones coming up out of the grave are those who made it through tribulation. So that first resurrection are those. The first resurrection is not until after tribulation. So, for us to think that, I just don't, I believe that when you look at this book, is a covenant book. And it's a covenant book that he made with his people that he chose. He chose a people. Why did he choose them? You have to ask him. You know, even in the book of Romans, it says, who is his counselor? Who's going to counsel him to say, why did you choose those people? Why did you choose these? Or why did you choose? I mean, you have to take that up with him. He chose Abraham and then all of his descendants, and he made a covenant with them. And that's what this book is about. It's a book of covenant unto Abraham and his descendants. And his descendants stand to inherit. There is an inheritance for his people. So there's certain scriptures. One of them, and you guys will know this in Luke chapter 17 and verse number 34. Luke 17:34. This is one of those scriptures that they like to extrapolate and say that, oh, see here, this is what it's talking about as far as the catching away. Which, if you believe this, that this is what defines the catching away of his people, then you have a total misunderstanding of the wheat and the tares. Total misunderstanding of the wheat and the tares. Because when you read the parable in the 13th chapter of Matthew about the wheat and the tares, the wheat was sown, and then what did the enemy do? He sowed some tares right along with the wheat. He sowed some tares in there. And so the servants of the vineyard said, well, should we just uproot the tares? He says, no, let them grow together. Let them grow up together. And then at the end, at harvest time, I'm going to gather the tares up first. So all the tares are going to be snatched away first. He's going to get them first. And then they're going to be prepared for the lake of fire. And then he says, what is he going to do with the wheat? All of the wheat, the finest of the wheat. Anybody know what he's going to do with the wheat? He's going to put them into his barn. And that barn is the New Jerusalem. I mean, he calls the New Jerusalem a barn. He uses that in that illustration there with the parable of the sower and the seed, wheat and tare. He compares it to a barn, or he says a barn, but that's a pretty fancy barn when you look at the city of heaven. That, you know, because that's going to be for the finest of wheat. But here in this verse here, and I'm going to read down to the end of the chapter here. He says, I tell you, in that night there shall be two in one bed. Now, I'm not going to say men because that word men was inserted. It's not in the text, the original text. They inserted that. But I tell you, in that night there shall be two in one bed. The one shall be taken, the other left. Two shall be grinding together. The one shall be taken, the other left. Two shall be in the field. The one shall be taken, and the other left. What really defines this, to let you know he's not talking about a pre-trib rapture, is what the disciples asked him. They answered and said unto him, where, Adonai? Where are these people going? When you say he's snatching away one, but he's leaving another, they're not asking about the ones who are left. They're asking about the ones who were taken. Where are you taking these? Where are you taking these? Where are they going? Now, his answer, he could have gave you a clear-cut answer. He could have gave you a clear-cut answer, but he didn't. He didn't, because it's the glory of Elohim to what? Before we answer this question here, let's go to Proverbs chapter 25 and verse number 2. Proverbs 25 and 2. It is the glory of Elohim to conceal a thing. So when he could have came right out and told them exactly what he was talking about and could have broke it down to them, he spoke a lot of times in parables. He spoke in dark sayings, because he says, you have eyes, but you can't see. You have ears, but you can't hear. You have a heart, but you can't perceive or understand. Because if you could see with your eyes and you could hear with your ears and you can understand with your heart, then I got to convert you. Then I got to heal you. I'm going to heal you then. But because many of us don't have eyes to see, ears to hear, or a heart to perceive or understand, he speaks in parables. But those who are royal unto him are going to search it out. And that's what he says. But the honor of kings is to search out a matter. So if you are of royal seed and you are royal unto him, you're going to get to digging. You're going to get to searching. You don't want everything right on the surface. If somebody gives you a treasure map, and sometimes we don't give me no treasure map. Just tell me where it's at. Just tell me how far I got to dig. I mean, don't give me. But if we had to get a treasure map, we would have to start on a journey. And a lot of times the treasure is not on the surface where you're just going to walk right up on it and kick it. A lot of times you got to dig and you got to try to find out exactly where it is. You got to go into some caves, some dark places, some mysteries and stuff to find it. And his whole word, his whole Torah is a treasure map. But you do have to dig and search and find it. So when he could have plainly told them back in Luke 17 and verse 37, when he could have plainly told them, when they said, where are you taking them, Adonai? But listen to his answer. He said unto them, wheresoever the body, thither will the eagles be gathered together. So he's telling them about a future event, but we have to understand this parable and try to find out where is the eagles and the fowls and the bee. When will they be gathered together for these people? When they're going to be gathered together? Because he says, wheresoever the body, notice now, he says, wheresoever the body is, the body of what? Body of what? The people that he snatched away. He said, wheresoever the body is, where he snatched these people away, he says, thither will the eagles be gathered together. So if you think this is a rapture, then all those bodies, he's setting up those bodies and he's going to call the eagles and the unto a feast. So if you think this is talking about the rapture, you totally missed it. That's what I'm saying. The Roman Catholic construct of Christianity has misled and blinded a lot of people. They don't understand Torah. You can't understand Torah. Anybody that feels that you don't have to keep the commandments, you can break the covenant. Why would he open up your understanding to the dark things, the secret things, yea, the deep things of Elohim, and you're intent on breaking his commandments? You're intent on, I don't have to believe in no commandment. You even have some of them, the Roman Catholic construct of Christianity, say you don't have to keep the commandments. You don't have to keep the commandments. All you got to do is believe. I mean, that thinking, that is what's going to get a lot of people caught up into these bodies where the eagle's going to be gathered together. But that's not what he's speaking of here. So we have to really dig into this and find out what he's talking about when he's talking about where these eagles are going to be gathered together. So in order to understand that, I want to go to Ezekiel, and there's some. First, I'm going to start Ezekiel 38, and we'll look at verse number 1. I'm going to read down here a little bit, Ezekiel 38, verse 1, because a lot of people think that what's going on right now is the beginning of Gog and Magog. Some of you might have even heard that. You know, this is the war of Gog and Magog, and this is not the war of Gog and Magog. It's Gog and Magog. That war is not going to happen until he gathers all of Yasharal, all of his people from the four corners, north, south, east, and west, from one end of heaven to the other. He's going to gather all of his people. He's going to take them into the land that he had promised to give them. Then you're going to see what is going to happen. And that's what Ezekiel 38 is dealing with here. And the word of Yahuwah came unto me, saying, in verse number 2, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal, and prophesy against him. Now, what does that sound like? Did we just get that out of Genesis chapter 10? Did we just get that? So let's read verse number 3. We're going to go to Genesis chapter 10. And say, thus saith the Adon Yahuwah, behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. So he is prophesying against Gog and Magog and Meshach and Tubal. He's prophesying against it. Now, when it says Gog, Gog is just speaking of somebody in a high position, like in our country. What's the highest position in our country? President. So if we were back in the Hebrew, we would call him Gog. That's our Gog. He is the chief prince over the United States of America. So when he says Gog, he's talking about the chief prince of Magog, Meshach, Tubal, all of them. So let's go see who he is directly talking to. So where we're going to go? Genesis chapter 10, right? And verse number 2, the sons of Japheth, Gomer and Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshach, Tyrus, the sons of Gomer, Askenaz, Riphath, Togarmah, the sons of Javan, Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. These are the ones, now he says, he picks out the ones that he's prophesying against. And so you see some of the names here, Magog. Magog is mainly a people or a land, but the one that they set up over him would be the king or the prince or the president, the prime minister. You know, you got some nations, they call them prime ministers, presidents. You've got some monarchies out there, they call them kings and things like that. But that top position is what Gog is. So he's talking about the sons of Japheth. He's prophesying against the sons of Japheth, and it's at a time, going back to Ezekiel 38, it's at a time that Yasharal, you'll find out, I'm not going to read this whole chapter, but you'll find out as you read this whole chapter, it's at a time when Yasharal is dwelling, all the 12 tribes of Yasharal is dwelling in a place of refuge. They're dwelling in peace. They're dwelling in their land. And this is what happens after they've been over in their land. It tells you what's going to happen unto them. And listen to verse number 4. And I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth and all thine army, horses, horsemen, and all them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company, bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. Now notice who's with them. Notice who's with Magog, Tubal, Meshach. Persia is with them. Ethiopia, Libya are with them as well. Gomer, which is the grandson of Japheth. Togarmah, remember we seen those names in there. Many people. So you have sons of Japheth and sons of who? Ham. Persia is a son of Shem. Ethiopia is a son of Ham. Libya is a son of Ham. So you've got Japheth, Ham, and some Shemites. All of these people together, and they're all coming up against Yasharel. And so I'm not going to read this whole thing. I want to go down and just kind of give you an idea of how many people that is a part of this. Even Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish, they were confederate with them. Verse number 15. I'll start with 15. 30 and 15. And thou shalt come from thy place out of the north parts, thou and many people with thee, all of them riding upon horses, a great company and a mighty army. And thou shalt come up against my people Yasharel. Listen to this. As a cloud to cover the land, it shall be in the latter days, and I will bring thee against my land, that the heathen may know me, when I shall be sanctified in thee, O Gog, before their eyes. Thus saith the Adon Yahuwah, art thou he of whom I have spoken in old time by my servants, the prophets of Yasharel? Notice now, the only ones that he has spoken unto, when you talk about the Ruach HaKodesh, The ones that he's spoken to is his prophets, Yasharel. Now, there's another scripture that goes along with this. Anybody know where that's at? That goes along with this scripture? Because he says, his servants, I've spoken about you in the old time by my servants, the prophets of Yasharel, which prophesied in those days many years that I would bring thee against them. I mean, this is a prophecy, but let's go to Amos chapter 3 and verse number 7. Amos chapter 3 and verse number 7. What does that say? Surely the Adon Yahuwah will do nothing, but what does he do? He revealeth his secrets unto his servants, the prophets. So if you want to know the secrets of Elohim, you got to go to his prophets. You got to go to his servants. And doesn't it say in, because Shaul knew this, in 1 Corinthians chapter 2 and verse 10, he says it's the Ruach of Elohim that searcheth Elohim, that searcheth what? The deep things of Elohim. So if I want to understand the deep things and the mystery, then what that deep things is talking about is the mysteries. If I want to understand the mysteries of Elohim, then I have to go to the prophets, his servants, the prophets. That's where I'm going to find the deep things or the mysteries, and if I want mysteries to be unlocked. So if we're looking at in our day and time, we want to see what's going on around the world, the war that is going on now, and what's going to come next. You know, what's going to come next. I have to go through the prophets and get an understanding of the prophets, because they're going to unlock this unto me. So anybody that is thinking eschatology, and eschatology is the study of end times. If you want to understand the end times, where do I go if I want to understand the end times? I got to go to the prophets. If I want to understand the end times, because a lot of times people will say, what's going on over there? Give me an understanding of the war. Is this Gog and Magog? Is this Armageddon? Are they setting this up for Armageddon? So if I want to understand the mysteries of Elohim, I got to go to the prophets. I got to go to the prophets. And I know there's a lot of people don't want to, I don't want to listen to the prophets. I don't want to, in Psalms chapter 147 and verse 19 and 20, Psalms 147, 19 and 20, he showeth his word unto Jacob, his statutes and his judgments unto Yasharel. He hath not dealt so with any nation. He has not dealt with any nation like he's dealt with Yasharel, and he's given his secrets and the deep things and the mysteries, he's given it unto the prophets of Yasharel, because he hasn't dealt so with any other nation. So why would I go to Rome to try to understand, the deep things of Elohim or the mysteries of Elohim? Why would I go to Rome to try to get it when they're not his prophets? They're not his prophets. They're not Israel. Rome is not Israel. Do y'all know he's putting judgment on Italy right now? Anybody heard the latest news coming out of Italy? They haven't had a baby born in Italy in 3 months. 3 months. They haven't had a baby born in Italy, the country of Italy, for 3 months. You can look it up. So if people dying every day, and the older population, the probability of them living long is shortened. You know, it's the youth that you got to look to. And some of the youngest countries in the world, as far as age, where do you think they are? The youngest countries in the world. The oldest countries in the world, when you look at age, the oldest ones are over in Europe. The youngest countries in the world, where do you think the youngest countries are? Just guess. Anybody? Africa. Africa has the youngest, when you look at age of the population, the youngest countries in the world is in Africa, and the oldest countries in the world are in Europe. So it's telling you that Europe is dying off, and the future is is in Africa. That's just where it's at. Because as a country, you're not going to survive if you ain't having babies in 3 months. You ain't had a baby in 3 months. No, you ain't going to survive. A country like that's going to die off. That's where Rome is. It's in Italy. That's, Rome represents the European nations, because not only did Rome take over Europe, but they took over what we call the Middle East, Northern Africa. They didn't stop there. They went across the seas. They went across the oceans and waters. Even to this day and this time, Rome is still alive in this country. And I do want to say, not tonight, but we're going to look more at First Yahuchanan when he talks about the Antichrist, and even when he said that the Antichrist was already at work in his day. And then we're going to look at Antichrist, because it's important that we allow the scriptures in the Torah to speak to us and tell us exactly who's who and what's what. But we'll talk about that at another time. So the mysteries and the deep things of Elohim are given unto his prophets. So back in Ezekiel, we were in Ezekiel, what was it, 38, verse number, let's go down to verse, they covered the land, 16 and 17. Thus saith the Adon Yahuwah, art thou he of whom I have spoken in old time by my servants, the prophets of Yasharel, which prophesied in those days many years that I will bring thee against them? And it shall come to pass at the same time when Gog shall come against the land of Yasharel, saith the Adon Yahuwah, that my fury shall come up in my face. So he's getting ready to tell you what he is going to do. And I want to go down to, let's go to chapter 39. Let's go to chapter 39. And verse number 1. Therefore, thou son of man, prophesy against Gog, which is the president, the king, the chief one, and say, thus saith the Adon Yahuwah, behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Now listen to this. Now in 38, he talked about how they covered the land, right? And it was such a great army. I mean, it was multi-nation. It was multinational. We're talking about different nations. It lists those nations there. Notice what he says here. He says, I will turn thee back and leave but the sixth part of thee, which means he's only leaving 1/6 of them. Yeah, that's all that's going to be left of all of that. So 1/5 of 100 is what? Everybody knows that 1/5 of 100 is 20. Yeah. So he's going to leave 1/6, which, I mean, we're talking out of all this great army, there's only going to be like 1/6 of them left. That's all he's going to. He's not destroying them completely, but 1/6 will be left. And will cause thee to come up from the north parts, and will bring thee upon the mountains of Yasharel. That's why I know Yasharel has to be, you're looking at Israel and the land of Israel, there's got to be mountains. It's going to be in mountains. And if you go over to where Jerusalem is and Israel is now, there's no mountains. So there's too many things in Scripture that tells us about Israel and where they're at and everything for us to believe the lie that that's the land right there. I mean, the devil is very tricky, and he's out to deceive the whole world. So I will smite, this is verse number 3, thy bow out of thy left hand, and will cause thy arrows to fall out of thy right hand. Thou shalt fall upon the mountains of Yasharel, thou and all thy bands, and the people that is with thee. I will give thee unto ravenous birds of every sort, and to the beasts of the field to be devoured. So he's given them all of this great army. he's going to give them unto the ravenous birds of every sort, the beasts of the field. Thou shalt fall upon the field, for I have spoken, saith Don Yahuwah. And I will set a fire on Magog and among them that dwell carelessly in the isles, and they shall know that I am Yahuwah. So will I make my holy name known in the midst of my people Yasharel, and I will not let them pollute my holy name anymore. And the heathen shall know that I am Yahuwah, the Holy One of Yasharel. So I want to go down to, it talks about, in verse 9, it talks about how they're going to, all of their military, all of their arms, all their ornaments and everything, they're going to burn them all up. And it says it's going to burn for 7 years, so that's a lot of armory. He talks about, in verse number 11, and it shall come to pass in that day that I will give unto Gog a place there of graves in Yasharel, the valley of the passengers on the east of the sea, and it shall stop the noses of the passengers. So it's going to, what? It's going to stink. It's going to stink. So many people dead. Remember, it says that the blood is going to come up to what? The horse's bridle. That's a lot of bloodshed. Because you're talking about, it doesn't give us a number of how big they came up against Yasharel, but it was so much that it covered the whole land as far as you could see. If you're in Israel and you go up in the mountains, you look out, and he says from the north and everything, as far as you could see, all you would see is military people in arms ready to come against Yasharel. But remember what Yahusha says. He says, in that day, 2 are going to be sleeping, one's going to be taken, and the other one left. 2 will be at the mill working, one will be taken, and the other left. 2 will be in the field, one is going to be taken, the other one left. And so while they're all out there and they're covering the land as far as you can see, and this is the interesting thing. When your enemy comes at you like a flood, remember it says that in Isaiah? When your enemy comes in like a flood, it's the Ruach of Elohim that raises up a standard against them. So all of these people are going to come up against Yasharel, but it's not going to be enough. Because once he raises up against them, the slaughter is going to be so great. It's going to be so great when he deals with Gog and Magog. The slaughter is going to be so great, blood up to the horse's bridle. People are, in fact, Israel won't even have to fight against them. I was just thinking, because there is going to be somebody out there leading us, and it does talk about how his what do you call it? Vesture, was dipped in blood. I mean, his blood just covered him. So, I mean, he's going to be out there fighting, but Israel won't even have to worry about it because he's going to fight our battles. You think David, you know what, this is my thought, when it talked about King Daud, and they said, King Shaul or Saul killed his what? 1,000, but King Daud killed 10,000, one man killing 10,000. So, but, we know that it was King Daud and his band of soldiers. He had about 400 in his band of soldiers. And, Saul might have killed thousands, but King Daud killed like 10,000, and he was a warrior. But when Yahusha comes and when he goes to battle for us, you think King David killed his 10,000? Wait till you see Yahusha. Wait till you see what he does. So in 39 here, let's go down a little bit, because it does talk about, the smell of them. It's going to cover, the land. It's going to take 7 months for them to bury them. That's in verse number 12, and to cleanse the land. So Israel, after the slaughter, Israel going to have to bury those who are left. They're going to have to bury those. In verse number 16, and also the name of the city shall be Hamana. Thus, Hamaona, okay. The city shall be called Hamona. Thus shall they cleanse the land. And verse number 17, and thou son of man, thus saith the Dan Yahuwah, speak unto every feathered fowl and to every beast of the field, assemble yourselves and come, gather yourselves on every side to my sacrifice, that I do sacrifice for you a great sacrifice upon the mountains of Yasharel, that ye may eat flesh and drink blood. Ye shall eat the flesh, notice now, verse number 18, ye shall eat the flesh of the mighty and drink the blood of the princes of the earth, of rams, of lambs, of goats, of bullocks, all of them fatlings of Bashan. And ye shall eat fat till ye be full, and drink blood till ye be drunken of my sacrifice, which I have sacrificed for you. Thus ye shall be filled at my table with horses and chariots, remember this, with mighty men, and with all men of war, saith the Adon Yahuwah. So who is going to get their fill of all of this? He says they're going to be filled till they're, till they get their fill, till they're drunken with it. Who's going to get their fill? Yeah. Every feathered fowl. So when Yahusha gave us that example, and they said, where are you taking them? Where are you taking them? He says, where these eagles are gathered together, that's where they're going to be. Whether the body is, that's where the eagles are going to be gathered together. So this is, and what does he call it? He says, this is my sacrifice. He is sacrificing all of this army, all these people, different nations. Sons of Japheth, there were some sons of Shem and some sons of Ham. They came up against Yasharal, and in the 38th chapter, the reason why they came up against Yasharal after they were in the land, this doesn't happen until Yasharal gets in the land. It's not happening right now because Israel is scattered to the four corners. So what the war and what they're doing over there now is not Gog and Magog, because that's not Israel. According to the scriptures, that's not even Israel. And Yasharal has to be in the land. But I heard somebody say the other day, yeah, this is the beginning of Gog and Magog, because they're not going to the prophets of Yasharal to understand what is going to happen. Most of them, and this person I was listening to, most of them go to Rome, and they're waiting for, or they're getting the interpretation through some of those theologians and people who think that they understand the end times and everything, and that's where they go. They're not going to Israel. And you know why they're not going to Israel to get an understanding? Because they don't want the world to know who Israel is. They don't want the world to know who Israel is. And I'm thinking, with everything that's going on now, we're getting very close to where the world is going to wake up and know who Israel is. We're getting very close to that. We're about at that time to where the world's going to wake up and realize. Now, there's some people who already know. There's some heads of states. There's some people who know. But the world in general, the world proper, doesn't really know who Israel is. In fact, Israel don't even know who Israel is. Right. That's a scary. Israel don't even know who Israel is. But he is waking up Israel. He's waking them up to know who they are, because prophecy has to be fulfilled. It has to come to pass. And the Roman religion does not want Israel to wake up. They don't want Israel to wake up, because they know if Israel wakes up, that's the end of them. That's their end. They'll realize, they'll be scratching, some will be scratching their heads. Man, we've been lied to all our lives. We've been believing something all of our lives. And they don't want that to happen, so they're trying to keep Israel asleep. But Israel's going to wake up. Now, in Revelation, let's go to Revelation. Revelation chapter, in chapter 16, it talks about Armageddon. It talks about Armageddon in chapter 16. And one of the lead-ins to Armageddon, anybody knows what the lead-in to Armageddon is? Drying up of the Euphrates. Drying up of the Euphrates is kind of a lead-in, because those armies are going to pass over They got to pass over that land. And like we read in Ezekiel, they're coming from the north. They're coming in a huge, you'll look out over the land and it's like a cloud covering the land. All you're going to see is armies and everything. We're not there yet because Israel has to be in the land. But in Revelations 19 and 17, and I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the fowls that fly in the midst of heaven, come and gather yourselves together unto the supper of the great Elohim. Now remember, we read in Ezekiel, this was his sacrifice. This is my sacrifice. When I go in here and slaughter all of these armies, all these people, the ones that he takes out of the land and he snatches them up, they're going into a big heap and all the birds are going to come. The ones who remain in the land, what's going to happen to them? Because we just briefly hit on it in 39th chapter of Ezekiel. All of those that were left in the land, remember the blood covers the horses, and the passengers that come through, what's going to happen with them? They're going to smell it. It's going to stink. And then what is Israel going to do for 7 months? Burying them. Burying them. So once they get into that valley, in Joel, it's called the Valley of Jehoshaphat. It's called the Battle of Armageddon. Once they get in there, you ain't getting out. They're not getting out. That's going to be the last war before Satan, and we'll read it here, before he actually gets cast into the lake of fire forever. Because during the 1,000 years of peace, where is Satan going to be? He's going to be locked up for 1,000 years. But he says, I'm just going to lock you up for 1,000 years, then you're going to get out. I'm going to let you out for a season. And that's when he's going to amass all these nations and this great army, because he says, one last time, I'm going to come against Israel. One last time, I'm going to try to beat, Yasharel. And that's going to be after the 1,000 years of peace. So our Messiah is going to be here. Israel's going to be in the land. He's going to mount all of this great army together, and he's going to be defeated. Verse number 18, that ye may eat the flesh of kings. And we read that in Ezekiel, right? We read that in Ezekiel 39. You're going to eat the flesh of kings, and the flesh of captains, and the flesh of mighty men, and the flesh of horses, and of them that sat on them, and the flesh of all free and bond, both small and great. So this is going to be a huge sacrifice, for all these birds and everything. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. Though these both were cast alive into the lake of fire burning with brimstone. And the remnant were slain with the sword of him that sat upon the horse, which sword proceeded out of his mouth, and all the fowls were filled with their flesh. So when Yahusha was talking about this in the 17th chapter of Luke, this is what he's talking about. He's talking about that great battle of Armageddon. That's when he is going to consume this army. One will be snatched to go to the feast. The other one ain't going to survive. They're going to perish in the land. The blood's going to go up to the horse's brow. It's going to take 7 months for Israel to bury all those people. 7 months. So this is what he's talking about. He's not talking about a rapture in Matthew 17 or Luke 17, 34 through 37. He's not talking about a rapture. So when people call that a rapture, then they're misunderstanding the teachings of Yahusha, because when he talked about it there, he wasn't even talking about, he was talking about this last battle, the battle of Armageddon. This is going to be the battle after the 1,000 years of peace, and then they're going to amass a great army, because isn't that what he says here? The beast and the false prophet, and they're going to get everybody that received the mark of the beast and them that worship his image. They're going to be a part of those nations that was read about in Ezekiel, the 38th and the 39th chapter. So then in verse number 20, or chapter 20, and dealing with verse number 4. I'm going to start reading there. And I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. The souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Yahusha and for the word of Elohim, which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands, and they lived and reigned with Mashiach 1,000 years. So he goes on to tell you in verse number 5, but the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. So the first resurrection, those who did not take the mark, who were beheaded, they're going to be a part of the first resurrection. And there has to be a resurrection before our Messiah sets up his reign, and he's going to reign for 1,000 years. So the tribulation is going to happen, and then you're going to have those who did not take the mark. They had to give up their head. They're going to be a part of that first resurrection, and they get to reign with him for 1,000 years. And the reason why I think that you're going to have you got some Israelites that might be in there, but those who actually did not take the mark or did not worship his image, you're going to see Gentiles in. I believe there's going to be Gentiles in this, because I do believe that there's going to be some Gentiles that's going to realize, I'm not taking the mark. I'm not taking the, I'm not going to worship the image. I'm not going to worship the beast. And they're going to say, well, you got to get your head. We're going to kill you. You got to get your head cut off. And many of them will get their head cut off. You probably have some Gentiles in there. But the ones who are beheaded, they're going to be in that first resurrection. And they get to reign for how long? 1,000 years. Now, for Israel, for Yasharel, those who make it in the kingdom, how long do we get to reign with them? Forever. We're going to reign with them forever. They get to reign with him for one day, because 1,000 years is as a day unto him. But, for us, we're going to reign with him forever. And it says that in Revelation chapter 5. Blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death have no power, but they shall be priests of Elohim and of Mashiach, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. So those who make it through the tribulation, through being beheaded, not taking the mark, or the number, or worshiping the image, they get to reign with him for one day or 1,000 years. But for Yasharel and those who are part of his bride, because when he makes up his bride, he makes up his jewels, he's making up his bride in Yasharel, they get to reign with him forever. So notice here, but they shall be priests of Elohim and of Christ. What's one thing that they're not? Kings. They're not kings. So, which means they're not royal. They'll reign as a priest, as a go-between, as a mediator for 1,000 years. But in Revelation chapter 5 and verse number 9 and 10, this is a different reign for a different people. And they sung a new song, saying, Thou art worthy to take the book and to open the seals thereof, for thou wast slain and hast redeemed us to Elohim by thy blood out of every kindred, tongue, and people and nation, and has made us unto our Elohim kings and priests, and we shall reign on the earth. So there's a difference between reigning as a priest for 1,000 years or one day, and then reigning with him for eternity as kings and priests. And the kings and priests that those who will reign with him, and we believe that is Yasharel and those who are part of his bride, they will reign in that order of Melchizedek. There is a Melchizedek order that Yahusha came in, right? And that order is king and priest. So those who get to reign with him as kings and priests, we're going to be in that order of Melchizedek. And who was Melchizedek? King of Salem and high priest of the Most High. So he was, and we see that in Genesis chapter 14, right? Genesis 14, where he is priest of the Most High and he's the king of Salem. And his order that he had and what Elohim made of him had no beginning, had no end. And it did not depend on what? When it says he didn't have a mother or father, it did not depend on what?
Oh, on his bloodline.
It doesn't depend on his bloodline. There was no lineage. There was no paternal lineage to Melchizedek. That's what it says in Hebrews when it talks about how he had no mother, no father, no beginning and no end, because that order of reigning with him as kings and priests, like we'll reign with him were kings and priests forever, it's not according to your blood lineage, because who were allowed to serve as priests? Levites. So you had to prove that you were a Levite, and then in order to be the high priest, because you could be a Levite and not a priest, and you could be a Levite and not a high priest. Or you could be a priest, but you're not a candidate for the high priest. Why is that? Anybody know why that is? Huh? You can't prove it. I mean, they had to prove their lineage. The high priest had to come from who? Aaron, but where did Aaron come from? Levi, but where did he come from? Who was Levi's son? The first one in his generation. And they had to trace his lineage all the way back to Kohath. They had to trace their lineage back to Kohath. If you could be a descendant of Levi, but not a descendant of Kohath. So you could be a priest, but you're not a candidate for the high priest. So the only ones that could be the high priest had to prove their lineage and trace their lineage back to Kohath. And it was in the blood lineage of Kohath to be the high priest. But when we get to reign with him as kings and priests, you'll have some who won't be of the lineage of Kohath. It won't matter because we're going to be in his bride as the Yahusha's bride, and we get to reign with him in that order of kings and priests. And so that's why he says here he's dealing with different kindred, different tongue, different people, different nation, because we won't have to worry about proving our bloodline going back to Kohath. Oh, I'm not of Kohath. I can't be in that order of Melchizedek. No. You know, when he redeems us and we get to reign with him as kings and priests, it's not going to depend on whether you can go back to Levi or Kohath, or because most of the southern kingdom was of what lineage? Huh? Judah. Judah and Benjamin, and there were some Levites in there. And then in the northern kingdom, you might have had some cities and some people in the northern kingdom, there was no Levites at all. So according to, if we went through the Levitical priest line, then there would be a lot of people who couldn't reign with him as priests on the new world. But because he's in the order of Melchizedek, where there was no beginning, no end, no mother, no father, in that order, what he's doing is he's just taking out that bloodline lineage that you have to go back to Levi or Kohath. That's basically what he's saying. There's a lot of things that the Bible speaks of, and a lot of times we think, I used to think this because it was taught to us as kids, that Melchizedek is still alive somewhere. I don't know if you guys ever heard that. But we were growing up, and we heard that, oh, Melchizedek, it says he has no beginning and no end, so he's still alive. He's on earth somewhere. And, but that's what we thought. That's what we were kind of taught. But that's not what he's dealing with there, because King Melchizedek was a human being like you and I. It's just that the order or the office, the order that he was in had no beginning, no end, and it was not tied to any lineage. You didn't have to trace a lineage. And so when we become kings and priests with him, we won't have to worry that I'm not a Levite. I can't serve as a priest because I'm not a Levite. Well, you don't have to worry about that because we're in the order of Melchizedek. Does that make sense? Because when you get to Hebrews and you start talking about, in the 7th chapter, you start talking about Melchizedek, that's where people think, well, he's still alive. He has no beginning. He has no end. He wasn't born of a mother or a father. And it's not... If he wasn't born of a mother or of a father, he wouldn't be one of us. He couldn't be one of us. If he didn't have no mother, no father. The only one that I know that didn't have no mother or father was Adam. Adam had no mother, no father. So was Adam Melchizedek? No, because we know Adam died. And everybody died, except for two people that we know, Enoch and Elijah, right? Because Enoch was translated, and then Elijah was caught up in a fiery tornado. If you've seen them tornadoes, how those tornadoes, just think that's a fire like that, and he was caught up in that fire. You think somebody get burnt? No, he's caught up in a chariot of fire in a whirlwind like that, and went up into the Shamaim. So when we look at some of these teachings, and they use certain scriptures to try to tell us of a rapture and everything, that's just not true. You've got to let Torah speak to you, and if you want to know anything about the future, you better go to the prophets. You better go to the prophets and get an understanding of the prophets if you want to know anything about the future, where we're at right now. If you want to know where we're at right now, you still have to go to prophecy, because prophecy would tell you where we're at now. If you want to know some of the and there's a lot of things that's happening around the world, but the next thing that's going to happen is the awakening of Israel and the gathering of Israel. And that's why I think out of this war and what's going on there now, and I think you never before have you seen such opposition to Israel, the Israelis. I mean, because you've got a lot of people around the world. It was at one time, you couldn't say anything against Israel. Everybody had to be, if you say anything against Israel, that you're anti-Semite. If you state facts, this is a fact. That's a anti-Semitic statement. Is that what they say it is? Wait a minute, I'm just quoting facts. Yeah, but that's anti-Semitism. I mean, you couldn't hardly say anything or do anything, but now you're starting to see more people standing up saying, hey, wait a minute, what they're doing is not right. I'm not being anti-Semitic. What they're doing is not right. And they'll say, well, they killed a whole bunch of babies and women and children, they obliterated and everything. But what have you done? I mean, you're justifying. No, I'm not justifying them. I'm not justifying anybody's actions, but you can press a people down for so long to where they're going to start to resist. They're going to resist, and that's what you have. It doesn't look pretty, and I hear a lot of people talk about, what Hamas did to Israel, but nobody talks about what happened to the Israelites when they were led into captivity, into slavery. They don't talk about that. They don't want to talk about how the pregnant women, they would just cut up their stomachs and take the babies out and kill them. They don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about taking a 2 or 3 year old child out of your house and using them as gator bait. They don't want to talk about that, and there's nothing you could do about it. I mean, they don't want to talk about how they castrate. In fact, all the people that died and the blood that was spilled in the Atlantic Ocean, they said that just changed. I mean, the whole path of the sharks and the fish and everything, it changed all of that because so much blood was left in the waters. And if you track those hurricanes that come off the west coast of Africa, and you track those hurricanes, you see where they're going. A lot of times, not all times, but a lot of times they show the transatlantic routes that those ships took and how they go into sometimes South America. Sometimes they go right up through the Caribbean and all there in Central America, then up into the United States, and you see the path of them, and that's just how those slave ships came over here. But nobody wants to talk about how our people suffered the atrocities, but yet we have to be sympathetic to what's going on now. And I don't condone the violence or anything, But I do know one thing, that there's going to be more bloodshed, and when our Messiah comes, he's going to set things in order. There's going to be a great reset when things come back, when he comes back. And like he says in Ezra, if you want to know what the end of the world is, you got to follow the prophets. You got to see what the prophets are. And as soon as you say this is the end of the world, what are we saying? It's the end of the Gentile age. When people talk about, is this the end of the world? Then is this the end of the Gentile reign? Because that is the definition of the phrase, the end of the world. When you say the end of the world, the definition of that is the end of Esau's reign, the end of the Gentile reign. Because even and this will be the last verse, but even Paul knew it in Romans chapter 11 and verse number 25 and 26. Romans 11, 25 and 26. Even Shaul knew it. For I would not, brethren, that ye should be ignorant of this what? Mystery. Because there's some deep things of Elohim. And it takes the Ruach of Elohim to discover those deep things. And Shaul knew it. He says, I don't want you to be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceits, that the blindness in part is happened to Yasharel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. The blindness is in part until the end of the world. So at the end of the world, it's not going to be in part anymore. It's going to be full blown. Everybody's going to know it at the end of the world, or the fullness of the Gentiles. So blindness in part is happening to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. And so all Yasharel shall be saved, as it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. So there is steps, phases, how all of this is going to end up. And Elohim is, our Elohim, our Abba, is there, he's full of mysteries. But if people are ignorant today, you're only ignorant because you want to be ignorant. Because there's too much information out there, knowledge, there's too much information and knowledge. And that's information, and education gives you knowledge. Information and education gives you knowledge. The application of knowledge is wisdom. So my application of what I know gives me my wisdom. But you know what's greater than that? Because it says wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom. But in all thy getting, so you got knowledge, which is education and information. The application of that education, information is wisdom. But to know why is understanding. To know why everything is, to know why, to have an understanding. That's why he says, now you got to get wisdom. Now that's the principal thing. Get wisdom. But in all you're getting, you better get understanding. You better know why. You better know why, because when you understand why, then you can start to really understand Torah and how things are going to happen the way, because you understand why. That's the understanding, is I know why. I know why. I know why things have to happen. I know why this has to come to pass. When I started to walk in understanding, I could see more of what Yahusha said in his parables. Once I start to understand why, I can see more. Once I knew who Israel was, that unlocked a lot of the mysteries, because I understood now. I have an understanding. And one of the greatest things you can have is understanding. And when our Abba talks about understanding, he uses it in the feminine gender. You ever notice that in Proverbs? If you read, 5, 6, 7, 8, all around there. And even started chapter 1, I guess, and going to chapter 8, and it talks about wisdom, knowledge, understanding. What does he call her? Or already get I gave it up. It's her. It's her. He puts it in a feminine gender, And it's not that it's a female, but he puts it in that feminine gender because he's trying to show you that's his companion. His companion he dwells in wisdom. That's his companion. That's it. I mean, Abba, Yah is an omnipresent, invisible, eternal spirit. But his companion is wisdom. His companion is understanding. That's why he says to get understanding, that's more precious. She's more precious than rubies. She's more precious than silver or gold, because you know why. If you can answer everything because you know why, then you have understanding. And a lot of times we're still asking questions. And we'll ask why. Why this? Why that? Because we're seeking an understanding. But once you get that understanding of why, or once you know why, that's when you have understanding. You don't have understanding until you know why. Until you know why. And that's why when I start to study Torah, I know why he chose Abraham. I know why. I know why. I know what faith is, and I know why I have to have faith. I know why I have to have faith. Because one thing that we don't, and I brought it out the other day, right, with Habakkuk, right? Chapter 2, let's look at that. I know I said, man, let me finish up here. Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse number 2, 3, and 4. So I know why. So when I know why, I've got understanding. And Yahuwah answered me and said, write the vision, make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it. Now, when he's talking to Yasharel, and they can read what is written, and they start running, you'll know why they're running. You know why they're running. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, what are you supposed to do? Wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry. Behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him, but the just is going to what? Live by his faith. So now I understand why. I understand why I have to have faith. I understand why. Because things ain't going to happen when I want it, where I want it. Oh, I mean, a lot of times we're very selfish. There's certain things that it has to happen now. And we're in a generation that everything has to be right now. We don't have the long attention spans. We don't. It used to be we could sit children down, and I remember, when I went to Sunday school and went to school, we had to sit and behave, and it would be it could be a long time. We had to sit and behave, but now children might sit for 10 minutes, 30 minutes, hour. If you can get a child, let's say a 7, 8, 9-year-old to sit for 60 minutes, you're doing something, because usually they ain't sitting for no hour. And even adults, our attention span is not like it used to be. We used to be able to sit in classes and for hours and just listen and teach and take notes and read and stuff. We used to do that for hours. We can't anymore, because the generation we're in now is an immediate generation. It has to happen now. If it doesn't happen now, then I lose my patience. But he says here that the vision and the understanding of it is going to come to pass, but I have to wait for it. And my faith is justified in me if I'm waiting. If I'm found waiting, you're going to see my faith. I know, so when I understand faith, I know I have to wait. That's why you understand Yahusha when he says, in patience, possess ye your souls. So I get a better understanding, because I know that a part of my faith is waiting. And in Hebrews 11th chapter, it says, all of these people, they did not receive the promise. They read it on tables. They knew they were going to have it, but they didn't receive the promise in their day. But they died waiting. They died in faith because they knew it might not come when I want it to come, but I'm not going to lose my patience. I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait on it. And we've been waiting for some time now, and it's getting very close to next year at this time. This whole world could look really different than what we see it now. It could be really different next year at this time. Because next year at this time they're talking about an election, and I'm not getting into politics, but there's so much that's going to happen within a year. Because I'm surprised, right after our Feast of Tabernacles, boom. We've been back from Tabernacles for what, 2 weeks now? See how the world has changed? And things are going to get worse and worse. And I do believe that we need to make preparations. We need to prepare ourselves. And on this Shabbat coming up for our Shabbat service, Koti Essen has asked for everybody to bring something for our prep room because we are preparing. Y'all do know that the ones who control OPEC are Arab nations. And they don't like how them Palestinians are being treated. They don't like them being slaughtered like that. So they don't like the fact that President Biden went over to Israel. That was today, I think. They're not too happy about that. So what do you think OPEC could do? Cut off the gas? They could. Or they could what? They could start charging $300 for a barrel of oil. If they raised it up to, you know how much our gas would be at the pump? If they charge that much for a barrel of oil, that's going to impact everything, even your grocery bill. So you're going to get a bicycle. Winter's setting in. Winter's setting in. So, winter's setting in. But if they raise the price of oil, that impacts everything. Not only at the pump, but your food bill, your clothing bill, your kids' clothes, your children's, everywhere where you spend money, it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you. And so what we're trying to do is we got a prep room, and we're trying to get that stocked up as we know that things are going to change in the near future. And I think everybody should have just be prepared, because if they go through a change in the monetary system to get set up for what they want to do, you might not be able to get to an ATM or a bank or get to a store, because they said once they do convert over, it's going to be like 3 days. I think they said they need like 72 hours. Has anybody ever noticed that your banks aren't always open all the time? I've noticed that even when I go in to do online, I'm quite, the bank it's not even working. My app wasn't working the other day, but then they'll say, well, we're doing some things. We had to, maintenance. Yeah. And so, you couldn't do.
I was at Walmart the other night. They said, we have no money in the store. If you don't have any cards, you can't buy nothing.
Yeah.
No money in the store. I got that. They said, you got cards? I said, I got a card, but why is there no money? Well, we don't have no money in here. We don't have no one the money system went down, and we don't have nobody to fix it now.
When was that?
That was Tuesday night.
Just this week.
Just this week.
It's changing.
Tuesday night, they said it was like y'all were worried, and it had to be like 9:30, and they said, let's let everyone know we have no money in the store. So if you're gonna buy anything, it's gonna only be card. If you don't have no cash,
Yeah.
we have no cash in the store. If you don't have no card.
because they're setting the system up. They're going to get out of cash. They're going to get out of cash. And so you're going to have to use your card or your device. And Whole Foods already got it set up. They'll scan your hand in Whole Foods. So we just got to be prepared. And I'm not getting nothing in my hand to do no kind of trading. You ain't putting nothing in my hand. Well, it's just so convenient. You might lose your phone. I'll lose my phone. I ain't putting nothing in my hand to be scanning my hand. That's just too close. It's too close, because they said they can start putting those chips in your hand, and you can just wave your hand to do your trading. And no, not me. But we have to be prepared for these things, and so that's what we're trying to do here. And we welcome our guests. We got some guests here tonight. Hallelujah. And you want to introduce yourself?
My name's Destiny. People call me Desi. This is my husband.
All right.
We've been married since 6 years now, right?
Hallelujah.
Since we were 16 years old. So.
Hallelujah. All right. Destiny and...
DMD. Yep. They call us DM Desi.
Okay. All right. You in Quad Cities here? Or? Oh, okay. Hallelujah. All right. Welcome. Welcome. All right. We're so glad to have you here on tonight. And for all those who joined in on the platforms that we're on, we thank you for being here. And we do say shalom to you. And we will be back on the Shabbat. We'll be back on the Shabbat here at 11 o'clock is when we have our Shabbat service going up and the teaching of Torah on the Shabbat. We're in the day and age now where we need to know. We need to have an idea and understanding of what's going on and how to prepare ourselves for what is going to happen, and to have an understanding. Because if you have an understanding, that means you know why. So we have to have, we want to get an understanding in all of our getting. We want to get an understanding. So with that, I'm going to say Baruch haba Hashem Yahuwah, which is blessed is he that cometh in the name of Yahuwah. And that's what Yahusha said. He says, you won't see me again till all of y'all say Baruch haba Hashem Yahuwah. So that's when all Israel will unite, all Yasharel will unite, and they're going to come together. They're going to say Baruch haba Hashem Yahuwah, which is blessed is he that cometh in the name of Yahuwah. And we were taught